From the preceding, it can be shown that the human soul is not transmitted with the seed, as if sown by intercourse. For the operations of any principles cannot be without a body, nor can their beginning be without a body, for thus a thing has to be as well as to work, when each thing works in so far as it is a being. On the contrary, the operations of whose principles are without a body, their generation is not through the generation of the body, but the operation of the nutritive and sensitive soul cannot be without the body, as is clear from the foregoing. But the operation of the intellectual soul does not take place through the bodily organ, as was stated above. Therefore, the nutritive and sensitive soul is generated by the generation of the body, but not the intellectual soul. But the transmission of the seed is directed to the reproduction of the body. Therefore, the soul begins to be nutritive and sensitive through the transmission of the seed, but not intellectual. Still, if the human soul began to exist through the transmission of the seed, this could only be in two ways. In the first way, that it may be understood to be in the seed act, as if accidentally divided from the begetting soul, as the seed is divided from the body. And when the body of the aforesaid animal is divided, the soul actually begins to exist in each living part. In another way, so that it is understood that the productive power of the intellectual soul is in the seed, so that the intellectual soul is supposed to be in the seed by virtue, but not actually. But the first of these is impossible for a double reason. First, because since the intellectual soul is the most perfect of souls and of the greatest power, its own perfectible body is having a great diversity of organs, through which its manifold operations can be accomplished. Hence it cannot be that which is actually done in a decided seed, because even the souls of perfect brutes are not multiplied by decision, as is the case with ringed animals. Secondly, since the intellect, which is the proper and principal virtue of the intellectual soul, is not an act of any part of the body, it cannot be divided accidentally according to the division of the body. Hence, not even an intellectual soul. The second is also impossible. For the active power which is in the seed acts for the generation of the animal by transforming the body, for the power which is in matter cannot act otherwise. But every form which begins to exist through the transformation of matter has an existence dependent on matter, for the transformation of matter reduces it from potentiality to act, and thus ends up being the act of matter, which is through the union of form, whence if through this also the existence of form simply begins. The existence of form will not exist except in that which is united to matter, and so it will be according to existence dependent on matter. If therefore the human soul is produced into existence by the active power which is in the seed, it follows that its existence is dependent on matter, just as the existence of other material forms, the contrary of which was shown above. In no way then is the intellectual soul produced into being by the transmission of the seed. Further, every form which is brought into existence by the transmutation of matter is a form brought forth from the power of matter, for this is the matter to be transmuted, to be brought back from power into act. But the intellectual soul cannot be brought out of the power of matter, for it has already been shown above that the intellectual soul itself exceeds the entire power of matter, since it has some operation without matter, as was shown above. Therefore the intellectual soul is not brought into existence by the transformation of matter, and so not by the action of the power which is in the seed. In addition, no active power acts beyond its kind. But the intellective soul surpasses the whole class of bodies, since it has an operation elevated above all bodies, which is to understand. Therefore, no bodily power can produce an intellectual soul. But all the action of the power which is in the seed is through some corporeal power. For the formative power acts by means of the threefold heat, fire, heaven, and the heat of the soul. Therefore, the intellectual soul cannot be brought into being by virtue of the seed. In addition, it is ridiculous to say that any intellectual substance is either divided by the division of the body or even produced by any bodily power. But the human soul is a kind of intellectual substance, as was shown above. Therefore, it cannot be said that it is divided by the division of the seed, nor that it is brought into being by the active power which is in the seed. And thus the human soul does not begin to exist in any way through the transmission of the seed. In addition, if the generation of a thing is the cause of its being, its corruption will be the cause of its ceasing to be. But the corruption of the body is not the reason why the soul ceases to be human, since it is immortal, as was shown above. Therefore, the generation of the body is not the reason why the soul begins to exist. But the transmission of the seed is the proper cause of bodily reproduction. Therefore, the transmission of the seed is not the cause of the generation of the soul into being. By this the error of Apollinaris and his followers is excluded, who said that souls are generated from souls, just as bodies are generated from bodies.